Hello, here's our first video for section 3.4, which is about completing the square. Uh, Completing the square is a method for solving quadratic equations. We've already gone through two methods in chapter 3. 3.1 was about extraction of roots, and 3.2 was about factoring. So let's practice those here just to warm up a little bit, get your math gears turning. So I think it'll help you understand what we're doing next. So try these on your own, and the answers will appear in a moment. So pause it now. And here are those answers. The first one here, you want to solve by factoring, so you need to get 0 on one side. And then I factored the left side, and you got 0 on the other side, so that means x plus 5 could be 0, or x plus 1 could be 0. And then if you subtract 5 from both sides and subtract 1 from both sides of this one, you get either x is negative 5 or x is negative 1. With this one, since you have it written as something squared here, that's when you want to do it by extraction of roots, because you can get the thing being squared, the y plus 2 squared, by itself on one side, and then you can do the extraction of root step here, which is just taking the square root of both sides, and after you do all the steps, you get either y is 1 or y is negative 5. So hopefully you got those ones right. Now, there's more background we need to help understand the idea of completing the square. First, I want you to do this exercise, but I'm actually going to do part A for you first here. We want to get some practice squaring binomials. The term binomial, by the way, the bi means two. So when you have a thing with two terms, a polynomial with two terms, and you're squaring it, that's called the square of a binomial. So what happens when you square things with two terms? Well, it means multiply itself. Multiply it by itself. That's what it means to raise something to the power 2. So we're going to do x plus 3 over 2 times x plus 3 over 2 there. And then we can FOIL this out. We can do the x times x will give you x squared. Then you got an x times 3 over 2. That's just plus 3 over 2 times x. And then there's plus another 3 over 2 times x from these terms. And then there's going to be 3 over 2 times 3 over 2 is going to be, let's see, I'll just write that as plus 3 over 2 times 3 over 2. And then we can simplify this a little bit. The 3 over 2 plus 3 over 2, because these have the same denominator, we can just add them up and write it as x squared plus 6 over 2 x. And then the 3 over 2 times 3 over 2, we're going to multiply the tops to get the new top. That will be 9. And then multiply the 2 times the 2 to get 4. And then we can simplify this a little bit more by just writing the 6 over 2 as 3. And you can write the whole thing as x squared plus 3x plus 9 fourths. And that's that. The rest of these are a little bit easier because you don't have to deal with the fractions. But later on, you're going to have to deal with fractions yourself. So I'm going to put the answers up in just a moment. So now's the time to pause it and try the rest of these yourself, because the answers are about to appear. So let's check that this is that you got these answers. I want to go over it a little bit to show you the pattern here. The x plus p quantity squared, this is like a general thing where p could be any number. P could be 1 or negative 5 or 3 over 2. And and you could think of like just taking those values of p and plugging it in here. So for example, with this one here, you've got p equals 1. Now, if you try to write this x squared plus 2x plus 1 in this form, it should be the same thing. So I mean, we can take this and write it as x squared plus 2 times p, but the p here is 1 times x plus p squared. Then that's actually the same as this. So you could actually just use this formula to square any binomial if you want. Just either replace the p with -5, like with this one, and you'll have 2 times -5 is -10. Here, if you do -5 quantity squared, you'll get 25. Here, if your p is 3 over 2, then if you do 2 times p, that would be 2 times 3 over 2 here. That 3 there is the same thing as 2 times 3 over 2. And the 9 over 4 here, that's the same thing as 3 over 2 squared. So this is a formula that works in general for squaring binomials. But what we're going to do to complete the square is we're going to take something that doesn't have the p squared yet, and we're going to figure out what p squared is and add that to your expression. So here's what I mean by that. So completing the square means starting with something like x squared plus 2px. So right now this is not a square of a binomial, but if you add p squared to it, if you figure out what your p is there and then square that and add that number to it, then suddenly this is of this form, x squared plus 2p times x plus p squared, and that, is the same thing as x plus p quantity squared. Because we just saw that if you FOIL out x plus p times x plus p, it's the same thing as x squared plus 2px plus p squared. So that's what completing the square is all about. And what we can do, we're not going to get to it yet in this video, this is just background, but we're going to be able to use this as a technique to solve equations by extraction of roots that we couldn't solve any other way. So here's an example. I'll do this one. Don't need to pause it here. So what we're going to say is this, we want to make this of the form x squared plus 2 times p times x plus p squared. But we have to figure out what the p is first. And the trick here is that the -12 is equal to 2p. So that, and then we're going to figure out what the p is. So that 2p is -12. Let's just write that out. You could just divide both sides by 2, and you get p is -6. And then you know that p is -6, then we can square that to get p squared. That's going to be -6 squared is 36. So that means that if we add 36 to this, then the resulting trinomial should be a perfect square. So if we try to factor this now to write it as a binomial times a binomial, we can do it as x. Let's see, we want two numbers that add up to -12 and multiply to make -36. Well, I think -6 is going to work. We got x minus 6 and x minus 6. And you can also, and if you want to check that by foiling it, that you get x squared minus 12x plus 36, you will. And then we could also just write that as the square of a binomial, x minus 6 squared. And that is the method of completing the square. Let's do it with this one too. Here our 2p is the 5x here. So we're going to say 2p equals 5. And then if you divide both sides by 2, you'll just get p is 5 over 2. Then we need to square that. So 5 over 2 squared really means 5 over 2 times 5 over 2, and that just gives you 25 over 4, and so that's what we're going to add to this. And now that you have that, we can factor this by saying that it's going to be x plus 5 over 2 squared. And that is the factored form of this. Okay, this video's dragging on a bit. Sorry it's so long, but this is a tricky concept, so I want you guys to practice this a little bit. So this is your exercise to do. Figure out what the p squared is that you need to add, and then turn that into a square of a binomial like I just did in the last example. And in the next video, we'll see how to use this method to solve equations that we wouldn't be able to solve any other way. So I'll see you in that video.